what would it look like if we dug into Scripture on a short theme series, which is what are some of the things that the Bible encourages us to do together so that good fruit grows in us. By fruit, if you're a newcomer to Scripture, the Bible uses the idea of fruit as a kind of metaphor to talk about good stuff that starts to change and shift in you and come out of you when you stay close to Jesus. That's kind of it. And the Bible sort of has this promise, if you stay close to Jesus, fruit will grow. It doesn't say grow fruit so that you can stay close to Jesus. Have you ever seen an orange tree straining to produce fruit? Or an apple tree, gotta get this apple out. It just happens. If that tree is rooted in good soil, completely off my notes now, the fruit comes. So as the start of this year, I was thinking, I'm used to thinking about doing New Year well as an individual. I've never really thought about it in terms of what we might do and commit to doing together. So that this may not be the best year, because we can't promise that. Like Jack read out, there will be trouble. See to it that you're not alarmed. Jane didn't expect to be in an ambulance right now. This stuff happens. But it could be the deepest year yet. And deep year is just my shorthand for saying a year where the fruit of God that comes from proximity to God starts to grow in your life in a way it's never grown before. And I saw fruit growing in our Jubilee Giving Garden, and I had no idea fruit could grow that plentiful and that quickly on that piece of land. And I just wonder if God's saying to us, you know what, it's not just about the vegetables. What if that's you? What if that's us? Right? So that's what I was kind of digging into. Back to the notes. Oh, have mercy. Where are we? No idea. Okay, yeah. Last week we looked into the first, there's no particular order to these, I guess, but the first practice, which was the Bible has a lot of importance around remembering well. It's possible to go through life not remembering anything. Some of us do that. We're just permanently in the moment and we forget what's gone before. And that can be problematic. But what a lot of us know really well, I know this too, is what does it look like for your present to be shaped by the trauma or fears or brokenness of your past? And so we looked last week, we're not going to go into it again, but we looked last week about what does it look like to remember well? And one of the things we're going to do, in fact, I haven't primed anyone to do this, so if nobody's feeling open to do this, I completely understand. But I said to us, look, wouldn't it be cool if, as a normal part of our services, one of the ways we help us remember well is by sharing stories, like 2-sentence, 3-sentence kind of stories, with each other about how God showed up this week or this year or last year or 10 years ago. It doesn't matter, just to rehearse the fact that God has been good in the past. It could be yesterday or it could be 20 years ago. Does anyone have like a micro story of how God has been good to them this week or something that they feel is appropriate to share before we dive into the next way to keep close to God together? Does anyone have a story? Okay. So we're going to move on to a second thing that I want to look at in this kind of what do we do together to make this the deepest year possible? And I wasn't quite sure what to call this, learning to belong, or the other sort of title I had was a seat at the table. But one of the things that we get to do is that we learn to belong to each other and to God. We're going to look at what that means. The big idea is this, that God welcomes us into his family, and his invitation is not simply to live life alone with him. It's actually to become, to live together as God's people with him at the head and each other as brothers and sisters. Now, that's very religious language. You'll have heard that a lot. So what I'm going to try and do today is try and show you a different facet of that so that it comes out fresh. And to start with that, I wanted to use a contemporary picture which some of you may be able to relate to. I want you to think back to your high school days. Sorry if that's traumatic. I hope it wasn't. I want you to think back to your high school days, and I want you to imagine what it would be like to be 14 years old and your parents have just moved to a new place, mid-term, and you're sent into school for the first day. Can you imagine what that feels like? I can feel the tension rising in the room. And you're new, and that means you don't have any friends yet. And it's lunchtime, so you head to the cafeteria and you walk in and take a deep breath, because this is risky territory. Do you understand? Can you picture this? There's like a dozen high school movies that play on this idea. And you take a deep breath and you grab a tray and you head into the queue, and you notice you're picking up because your senses are on high alert as you look around this room. And you're taking it all in, and it's loud. That's the first thing you notice. Everyone, and the other thing is that everyone else around you seems to know how it all works and where everyone is supposed to sit. And before you even think about food, you're asking a different question. You're asking, not what should I eat, but where am I supposed to sit? Where do I belong? Because I don't belong yet. So where will it be that I could sit where it feels like I'm not intruding? I don't want to be laughed at, but I don't want to sit on my own either, because that just feels super awkward. So you scan the room and you see some people sitting alone, and you figure that they've just given up trying to fit in. It's just easier for them to go it alone. And that wasn't very helpful for you. So you keep looking around and you see some other groups of kids sitting together. And then as you look, you kind of piece together the story that's going on. You see a table for the seriously sporty kids. Do you remember the sporty kids? Yeah, I never got to that table. And there was another table for what we called the beautiful people. Do you remember the beautiful people? And you can tell that there's a price to be paid for sitting at these tables. You probably have to look a certain way, or talk right, or be particularly funny, or confident, or impressive in some fashion. Whatever it is, you're pretty aware that you don't have it. This is my story. So you figure that they're not about to invite you. And as you keep scanning the room, you then notice another table with a bunch of people who don't look quite as homogenous as the others, don't look quite the same as the rest. They're a bit different, not commonly different, they're just an interesting mix of people. And you notice that there are a few spaces around their circle. And as you're looking, one of them looks up to you and smiles and says, "Hey, you're new, would you like to come and sit with us if you want?" We actually had an experience of this. I didn't brief him that I was going to tell this story, but when we first arrived on the coast here, and it was the boys' first day at Langdale Elementary, I will never forget. I was in trauma because they didn't tell me this was going to happen. I was reliving all of my first days at school through my kids. Like, I was not being a good parent that day. I was just anyway. We get to Langdale, and Isaac walks off with supreme confidence and makes friends instantly. He has that gift, and it's all his mother's fault. Anyway, but Jasper was holding back a little bit until this other kid from his new class saw him, and they'd obviously been primed that a new kid was coming. And so this boy sort of runs out to us and says, "Hey, you must be the new student." Huge smile, kind of like if there was a boy that was like a Labrador in character. Like, that's what I'm talking about, right? Just joyful welcome. And he said, "Hey, come, I'll introduce you to the others." And off they went. And I was like, what just happened? That's belonging. That's a transformative invitation. I don't know if it transformed Jasper's day, but it certainly transformed mine, because I got in the car and I was a little teary, I'll have to admit, because I was like, I didn't know what was going on. Oh, what have we done to our children? Are these Canadians going to kill them? I don't know. It's dangerous out here. There's bears and people, and I don't know. And I rang up Angela. I said, "This just happened." And she's like, "Yeah, it's okay. They'll come home tonight. It's okay." So that really meant something to me. Anyway, that's the kind of story. Can you feel it? Don't just know it. Can you feel what I'm talking about, right? And so back to our cafeteria analogy, you hear this invitation, "Hey, come sit with us." And so you decide to take a risk and join and accept the invitation. So you come but you sit on the edge. You know how you can be present but not present. My dog is like this. She respects me, but she despises me. She loves my wife. Our dog loves Angela. So if we're sitting in the lounge of an evening, and I'll be like, "Ruby, come sit next to me." And Ruby will look at me, and then look to Angela and with, please call me to you. I don't want to sit with him. Please. And so all Angela needs to do is do pat, pat, and she is there like a rocket. Anyway, why did I tell you that story? I have no idea. But it's a bit like Ruby that if I force her to come and sit with me, it's not because I'm horrible to her. She just thinks I'm the alpha and she's respectful of me, but she really loves somebody else. So she's sitting next to me and everything in her body is saying, I want to be somewhere else. I'm here because you told me to be here, but I want to be somewhere else. I'd like to be over there with her. I reckon this kid is feeling a bit like that. He's accepted the invite, but everything in his past is saying this won't end well. Because most people experience rejection, not warm belonging. Do you know what it's like to be in a place and there's part of you that's like, I'm here, but I know where the door is and I can make a swift exit. I put it to you that people who don't know church well would feel like that if they came here. Not because you guys aren't pleasant, not because your invitation isn't heartfelt, but because they've been burned before. So imagine this kid sitting on the edge here, and they're ready to run if it needs to happen. But nothing goes wrong. So you come back the next day, 14-year-old, midterm, new kid, and you see them again, and again they say, hey, come sit with us. And then that becomes your habit. Until one day, and you don't even know when this happens, but you realize you're not borrowing a chair anymore. This is your seat, and these are your people. That's belonging. Now, I share that story. I know it's not the Bible, so we'll get to the Bible in a second, but I share that because I want you to feel what belonging is. We use the word loosely in church and in Christian circles a lot. We talk about being, I don't know, a church family or saying like you belong here. And I've noticed that when those words are said but not backed up with that kind of radical welcome, they cheapen and they loosen. And for many people, those words are hard to believe because their experience of belonging has been really painful, really complicated, or highly conditional. You belong if. So I want to name 3 common patterns to set up the radical nature of our Bible reading today, which I'm amazed at having read it fresh this week. First, I think a lot of people go through life with a posture of no belonging. They've given up on the idea. They judge it safer to not try and belong anywhere in any deep way because they have been repeatedly judged or rejected before. And so they learn to keep their distance and they rely on themselves, and it works, but it's lonely. Do you know people like that? Are you someone like that? That's the first one. Second one, as we've said, is conditional belonging. This is belonging with rules, like the cool table. You can join, but only if they invite you, and only if you're wearing the right clothes and you look the right way. And you'd better keep up that appearance, or else you will be rejected. Whether it's what you should wear, how you should act, what you shouldn't say, what you shouldn't admit. And like I said, if you break the rules, you will feel it and be pushed to the edge or excluded altogether. And if we're honest, this can happen in churches a lot. Not always loudly, often quietly and implied, but people feel like they have to look together in order to be relevant here and to fit. I'm not getting at you. I'm talking about churches in general. I've been to a lot of churches, and I know what this feels like. Like they're only welcome if you put on the right face. And then there is this third way that we've hinted at in our stories that's much rarer in my experience, which I might think of as grace-based belonging. Grace-based belonging. This is different because it doesn't begin with rules or improvement or proving yourself. It begins with welcome. You're included before you are fixed. You are loved before you are useful. You are welcome before you know how to behave. How many of you have had that experience on a consistent basis? That kind of belonging can feel almost too good to be true because most of us spend most of our lives experiencing no belonging or conditional belonging. But this is exactly what we see modeled in the wonderful story of Zacchaeus. So let's hear his story now. I'm going to pass the mic to Pauline, who has wonderfully agreed. She's found her glasses. We're grateful for that. And Pauline's going to read our reading, and it's going to be on the screen as well. Thanks, Pauline.
Okay. Zacchaeus the tax collector, Luke 19, 1-10. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was so short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So Zacchaeus came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He is gone to be the guest of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost."
Thanks, Pauline. Now, you know this story super well. It's a children's church favorite, isn't it? How many of you grew up with the story of Zacchaeus? He's right along there with the flood and Jonah and the whale. Did you have those felt, what do they call them? Hello, flannel graph. I should have known that. You just gave me you should know this. What kind of pastor are you? That's what I got from Kim right here. Yeah? We know this story. One of the problems with knowing a story is that you don't know the story. You think you know the story. So let's see what's going on here. This story has really impressed me, moved me this week. Okay, Zacchaeus, let's do this real quick. Zacchaeus is wealthy. You know this. He's not respected and loved, however. He is deeply reviled and hated. He's a tax collector, which means he's a Jewish person who's decided to ally himself with the mission and the aims and the goodness of Rome. Not the goodness of Rome. I mean, he wants to work to make Rome richer. That's what I'm trying to say. At the expense of his own people. In fact, not only is he a tax collector, the word says he is a chief tax collector, which means he runs the system locally. People locally know who he is, and they know that he has got rich by making them poor. And he has got rich by making their brutal oppressors wealthier. Now try and imagine Zacchaeus. I was really thinking about what it would look like in our time. But imagine this guy, and it's him who Jesus chooses to favor with his presence. If you want a modern equivalent, and there's no direct parallel here, but this is the best I could come up with. Think of a loan shark. Imagine there was a well-known, wealthy loan shark that lives in Gibsons. I don't know that there is. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I'm just trying to, this is an exercise in imagination, right? This is somebody who goes after people who are already desperate and appears to offer them what looks like a lifeline that nobody else will throw, a loan when nobody else is willing to help, but conditional. The interest is brutal. So the person is desperate enough to say yes, but over time, their debt grows and it doesn't shrink. They end up more and more trapped, more and more stressed, more and more ashamed. And meanwhile, the loan shark gets richer and richer and richer. So I want you to hold that in your mind, that sort of revilement we would feel at such people, and then feel the shock that this story would have had with Jesus' followers. Imagine Jesus coming into our town, and imagine if one of the things you looked for when a well-known teacher and preacher came into town was who they chose to invite themselves home with. Imagine if that was one of the biggest honors that the traveling teacher could bestow on a community. So everyone's watching. And imagine Jesus coming into our town in that kind of culture and saying, "Hey, loan shark, I'm coming to your house to stay." It's not just practical, I need a place to eat. It's a communication of something to the people watching. So, Zacchaeus, that's the level of shock of our story. I want you to try and feel it, right? Zacchaeus hears that Jesus is coming to his neighborhood. And this is where the other side of the coin is quite interesting to look at too, because Zacchaeus starts not to behave like a self-contented, greedy person. He actually starts to show a chink in his armor that he has desperate need. Look at how this comes out. Zacchaeus hears that Jesus is coming, and he climbs up a tree to see him. We're used to this because we have used flannel graph to put Zacchaeus up a tree. Were you the kind of child that put Zacchaeus up a tree upside down just to annoy your teachers? Maybe so. But here's the point. Grown men in that culture didn't run, much less climb up trees. It was a highly undignified thing to do. It is an act of desperation. And it tells you something about him, that underneath all his wealth, he's not doing fine. He's not confident, as you might suppose he would be. He's desperate. Desperate enough to risk looking foolish for something that his heart knows he needs. So Jesus comes and he's up a tree, and he looks up and Zacchaeus, and he says these words, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. Collective intake of breath from the crowd, who cannot believe this is happening. Now notice what Jesus does not say. He does not say, Zacchaeus, we need to talk about your behavior. Zacchaeus, sort out your life and then I will come near and eat with you. He doesn't even say, prove, Zacchaeus, that you're serious. He just chooses him as he is, publicly in front of everybody, causing an immediate scandal. Welcome to following Jesus. It's also important to note that in that culture, I've kind of said this already, but going to somebody's house to stay was no small thing. Even more so, if you were a visiting high-profile teacher, as Jesus was seen to be at that time, choosing someone to stay with was a massive sign of acceptance, of closeness, and of an intention to develop friendship and give approval. It meant, I am not ashamed to be seen with the likes of you. All of this happens when Jesus says, I'm coming to your house for tea. Or for dinner, whatever. And of all the people that Jesus could have honored when he came into that town, he chooses the tax guy, the loan shark. So the crowd reacts exactly as we would expect. And I kind of think that this is the edited version in the Bible. He went to a house of a sinner. I suspect there was slightly more fruity language. Because it was really shocking. Okay. And that line matters because it shows us something important. This story is also not just about Zacchaeus, it's also about the crowd. It's about what happens inside a religious community when grace shows up for somebody they don't believe deserves it. And the community says, that's not okay. Here's the hard truth. The crowd has already decided long ago that Zacchaeus does not belong, will not belong, and cannot belong. So they push him outside. They had built a wall, but Jesus walks straight through it. So yes, this is a story about Jesus welcoming a sinner, but it's also a story about Jesus confronting a community. He is showing them what God is like, and he is also exposing what they are like. And that matters for us because, my friends, we are the crowd now. When Jesus welcomes somebody we dislike, we have a choice. We can grumble and keep our distance like most of the crowd did, or we can let Jesus retrain our sense of who gets to belong in his kingdom. This is one of the main ways I think a church learns to abide in Jesus so that good fruit grows. As we stay close to him, he will work in us to change who we get to make space for. Okay, back to the story. Zacchaeus responds fast. His change is really quick, a lot quicker than most people, I suspect. And he immediately says, I'm going to give half of my wealth to the poor and repay back anyone I've cheated 4 times over. You know this stuff. It's a huge change, but notice the order. This is the bit that's important. Jesus does not wait for Zacchaeus to change before he offers his welcome. Jesus offers his welcome, and his welcome becomes the beginning of Zacchaeus' change. Do you see that? Belonging comes first. Belonging comes first, becoming comes second, and as a result of belonging. Jesus then says, "Today salvation has come to this house, for the Son of Man came to seek and save the religiously comfortable." No, to keep and seek and save the lost. And then he adds, don't miss this man too is a son of Abraham. If you were a first century Jew, this is Jesus saying he belongs like any of the rest of you. No different. Paul later says the same thing in Ephesians 2:13 and 19. Listen to this. "But now in Christ Jesus, you who were far away have been brought near by your efforts? No, by the blood of Christ. And consequently, you are no longer foreigners and strangers, but fellow citizens with God's people and members of his household." Family language. That's for you. So, this is not performance-based approval. This is belonging language. So what does it mean for us? Let's end with this. First, if you are somebody like Zacchaeus, I don't mean to say you rip poor people off. If you do, see me afterwards. No, no joke. But if you're like Zacchaeus in the sense that you feel like you can't possibly belong in God's family because you have disqualified yourself or others have disqualified you, please hear that Jesus doesn't say fix yourself first, and if you can, then you will be welcome to come close. Jesus says, come close, and then let me slowly and carefully heal and correct what needs healing and correcting. This is shocking to a lot of people who've heard Christians and churches say the opposite. Get yourself in order, and then we'll talk. That's a big reason why many people quietly disqualify themselves. They think, I don't pray very well, or I don't know enough, or if people knew the real me, how many of this, don't nod your heads, but how many of you feel this? If they only knew what I was really like, they wouldn't want me here. If only they knew what I have done, that's the past shouting at you, by the way, they wouldn't want me here. But Jesus is not put off by the fullness of the real you. He welcomes misfits easily. In fact, he even says this, you are blessed if you are poor in spirit. Knowing, in other words, you're blessed if you know that you have huge need of God because you can't get there on your own terms. Because if you're one of those people, the kingdom of God is yours. It's really radical stuff. The people that Jesus struggled with the most were the ones who were pretty certain that they were already fine, the ones who were proud that they had made the grade on their own. When you meet Jesus, in other words, belonging is offered always and only as a gift, not a reward. And note this too, that while Jesus invites people, he does not force them. Zacchaeus had to decide to come down the tree. Jesus didn't send up a lasso and pull the guy down. Get into church. Right? He had to decide to climb down the tree and open the door to his home. He had to receive what was offered. If you feel like God and the church would likely reject you because of your past or your current issues, then I hope you will receive this as the best news, because it is deeply, profoundly, and always true. But here's the second implication of the story. If you've been around Jesus a while, if you've been in church a lot, this story can be a mirror. Because the question is not just, will I accept Jesus' welcome? It is also, will I join Jesus in the way he welcomes other people? So maybe take a moment to ask this Sunday, who are the people that I quietly keep at arm's length? Who are the ones in this community that I suspect? Who are the ones around here that make me nervous? Who are the ones here whose lifestyle makes me feel a little bit, not like those people. Who are those people in this area? Who do we think would bring mess and complication and awkwardness and risk if we welcomed them in around our table? And as you imagine them, I want you to picture Jesus saying, that person, hey, I'm going to their house for dinner today. What would it be like if we followed Jesus to start doing what he did? This is how Jesus builds a church. Not by creating a Christian country club for the already sorted, but by creating a family where people with messy lives are first welcomed and brought near, and where change and healing grows then from love and not shame or requirement. Isn't that good news? And I didn't write this down, but here's another angle to this too. That we think of those difficult people as outliers. The truth is, the people who are evidently not capable of making the grade are a gift to us because they tell us something that is also true about us. None of us can make the grade. All of us are pretending to some extent. I put it to you very gently, me included. So the invitation is, if Jesus will accept the tax collector, then you can afford to let your face be shown as it really is. Take courage to be known. May this be a place where you can share who you really are. That's one reason why I try to share with you that I struggle with anxiety. I don't know pastors are supposed to say that. It feels like we're a bit faithless. But it's a wrestle with me. I'm an awesome catastrophizer because of my past. I have learned a way of surviving. And my journey is to learn that Jesus says, I'm here. Do not be afraid. I hold your future. And then when I'm panicking, I can go to Angela, I can go to Laura or other people that I trust and say, I'm having a catastrophizing day. Will you help me? Will you stand with me? And they don't like, you? Yes, Don elders, we need a meeting. Pastor Mark has slipped. I'm no different to you guys, right? I would love this to be a place where we can be profoundly honest. I mean, carefully, you don't tell everyone everything. That's not wise. But I'd love it to be that this is the sort of place where slowly but surely you feel able to be known. Not because of your perfection, but also because of your imperfection. And what happens then is as we start sharing stories like Marilyn did, the stories will start to come out of this is how Jesus took me from being anxious to being the most peaceful guy in the room. That's what I'm praying for. I want him to grow so much peace in me as a gift that when the storm hits, you're lining up to speak to me because I'm at peace. And I'd love you to do the same thing. Who of you needs joy right now? May it be so. Donna, may it be so that the Lord grows joy in you. So may it be that the Lord grows joy up in you, that the people around you in Christensen just know you to be this fountain of joy that is not ridiculous optimism, but is rooted in the reality that God hasn't given up with you yet. Who of you needs peace? Who of you needs contentment? Which of you need a sense that God has got the direction, so I don't need to hang on to this? May it be that this is the result of staying close. And when that is, we get to share the story with others. I'm so excited about this. So let me finish with this. Our church, our table, will not get bigger because we run a self-improvement program. Our table will get bigger when we stay close to Jesus and his welcome starts to shape the way we welcome. I put it to you that there are very few places in this community that offer the kind of unconditional, loving belonging that Jesus models and that the church is called to follow. If we start living this way, not out of sort of furious effort to please Jesus, but we just allow him to take us one step at a time, I put it to you that this place will be full. Not because we have the right programs, but because people are desperate to belong. So in a moment, after we close this service, we're going to have a chance to practice this. We're going to set up our room for a potluck lunch. Literally, the tables are coming. And my challenge to you is this. why not sit with somebody you don't know and get to know them a little? It's easy to go with our usuals, our regulars. But why not try somebody new? Why not keep an eye out for somebody also who's hanging on their own or hanging at the edges? Because sometimes the greatest gift is the, hey, why don't you come and sit with us? We'd love to have you. That can change somebody's day, possibly somebody's life. And remember, if we follow Jesus, it's always belonging first, becoming second. Amen?